to the second part of the meat course of this workshop. Mireshghi is going to speak today about both Shia opinions around the issue of organ transplantation, but also the context, the social, political, medical syndicate context in Iran that helped develop thinking about our organ transplantation. So Elham Mireshghi is actually the assistant course director for this program. So all the mistakes are on her, right? So let's get your 2 minutes out there. She is currently ABD, all but dissertation, at UC Irvine in the Department of Anthropology. And she spent her fieldwork and time sitting and talking to the people who are involved in the organ market there, both from the patient perspective, those who are the advocates, and religious leaders and political policy advocates in that domain. So, Elham, thank you for honoring us.
I really enjoyed all of the lectures that I was able to participate in. I'm really unfortunate and sad that I wasn't able to be here all day yesterday and today. As some of you may have noticed, I had a 9-month-old baby with me here yesterday who also kept me up quite a while last night. So if you see me kind of being incoherent at times, I really do apologize. Be patient with me. So first of all, how many of you are dozing off? Do we need to stand up and stretch a little bit and just get some blood flowing? No? I definitely do need to do that right now. I have a lot of material packed in these 2 lectures, and we have very limited time. I'm going to possibly skim through some and dedicate a little bit more attention to the stuff that's more specifically about what is happening inside Iran, rather than diving into the differences among Shia scholars or what Shiism really is, because I think that in itself is a fundamental question a lot of people in this audience would have, but unfortunately I don't have all of the expert knowledge necessary for that. I'm not an Islamic studies scholar, I'm a medical anthropologist, and also we unfortunately don't have the time to dedicate to it. So part 1, some very general background. We already know, we heard yesterday, that 10 to 13% of Muslims are Shia, and the vast majority of those Shia Muslims are what we call 12 Shia. And the majority of them live in Iran and other countries like Iraq, Pakistan, and Azerbaijan. So 1/3 of the world's Shia population actually live in Iran. A population of almost a little over 70 million people. The vast majority, over 95% of them are Shia. So some very, very basic differences among Sunni and Shia. Shia consider Ali, the son-in-law, and the cousin of the Prophet, peace be upon him, to be his divinely chosen successor. And the 10 descendants of Ali, his children, and the children of their children, are revered as rightly guided leaders, or imams, and exemplars of the prophetic tradition. So according to Shia tradition, the 11 descendants, and I should add that the 11th descendant is considered to be an occultation, is the promised Mahdi, who is believed to return at the second coming of Jesus Christ. So primary difference between Sunni and Shia sources of Islamic law is the Shia reliance on the words and actions of the 12 imams. So these 12 imams, who were living examples of the prophetic traditions from practically 250 years, everything that they've said and everything that has been written of what they did serves as a living and pure and uncontroversial and certain example of the embodiment of Islamic injunctions. So in some ways, or definitely, you could say that the sources that Shias use are far more expansive than and extend for a longer time than what we have from Sunnis. So after the occultation of the last imam, Islamic scholars were considered to be the indirect deputies of the imam. And while Sunni scholars adopted, for the most part, the Ash'ari and the Maturidi theology, Shia scholars leaned towards Mu'tazili theology. And you probably heard a little bit about that. I don't have time to go into the details, but just as a quick reminder, for Mu'tazilites, human reason has the capacity to understand and decipher universal moral values on which it is believed that Islamic law, divine law, is based on. That doesn't mean that independent of revelation, an individual can already decide and understand everything that needs to be done to live a good and just spiritual life, but that human reason had the capacity to, in conjunction with those revelations, make sense of why it is perhaps that something is being demanded or decreed in a particular way. The details of that, again, far beyond the scope of this discussion, but in a really, really simplistic way, I guess we can explain it a bit here. So reason is said to play a crucial role in Shia ijtihad, or what is it called, intellectual exertion, to interpret legal sources and derive their rulings from two contexts. So when a ruling is not directly and with certainty derived from the Quran and the Sunnah, for example, the fact that we're supposed to pray 5 times a day, that we're supposed to fast during Ramadan, then on all other issues, ijtihad, or that exertion, intellectual exertion, is necessary to find the most probable legal ruling. So we would say that as fallible human beings, we cannot know with absolute certainty what is that thing that God demands of us, because it's not with certainty established in the sources, but we have to try to get as close as we possibly can to what is divinely ordained. So no scholar is infallible. The opinions of legal scholars, the mujtahid, so those people who engage in ijtihad, are subject to revision. In the legal, we know the legal ruling of a scholar on a given issue is called a fatwa. So it's said that since it's the ethical duty of every Muslim to follow divine law to the best of their ability, they have to determine who's the most educated, the most knowledgeable source of guidance. And in the absence of the imams, we go to the mujtahid. Logically, you're supposed to follow the most knowledgeable, the most credible, reputable mujtahids within the community. And for someone to become a mujtahid, they have to undergo a very arduous and rigorous process of training in the Shia seminaries. It takes, I would say, equivalent to several PhD degrees in order to become a mujtahid, to become a jurist, a person who can give legal opinion. Now, among those people who are mujtahids, who are conventionally given the title of Ayatollah, which means an example of God, a sign of God, among those, there are some senior scholars who are accepted within the community to be the most knowledgeable. And these are the people who will have published a risala, various compendia of legal edicts, so book of fatwas, covering a vast area within Islamic jurisprudence. And they are usually much older than, much senior than to many of the other mujtahids, and they are called Ayatollah Uzma, the grand Ayatollahs. So the Maraja is the most, or are of the Maraja, or the Marajas are the most knowledgeable mujtahids who serve as sources of emulation and publish compendia of legal opinion. Here's examples of Ayatollah Sistani in Iraq, one of the Maraja. He went to the Makam Shirazi, and to the far right Ayatollah Fazlullah of Lebanon, who passed away, I believe, in 2002.
He died.
Yeah, that's the way that you come. Yeah.
Compendia. The way I look at it, it has to be the living person.
Yes.
So who is that?
That was Sistani.
Sistani.
Yeah. So I just provided 3 different
okay,
people
yeah.
who were Maraja.
Yeah,
so technically right now, some would say that your Maraja has to be a living person. Some say that if at the time, if you were following a Maraja and that person passes away, that you can continue to follow that passage. Maraja, you can still follow their fatwas. And some would disagree and say that now you have to, since that person is dead, you have to transition to a living person. But not everybody agrees with that, and that's why some people still do follow like Ayatollah Khomeini.
So don't we say if they died, all the fatwas are invalid?
No, it's not that it's invalid. Just the logic behind always following a person who is a living scholar is so that all of their fatwas are up to date. So if conditions change, if something changes, you don't necessarily want to be relying on something that somebody said 50 years ago, because chances are you're going to have a more reliable and current fatwa. But again, a lot of people would say that if you were following Ayatollah Khomeini and he passed away, you can continue to follow his fatwas on all old issues. On new issues that arise, let's say he doesn't have anything on stem cell research, then you can't go to him, then you go to refer to a living Raja. So Shia fatwas on organ donation. Majority of Shia scholars permit organ transplantation and organ donation from both living and brain-dead persons. Now the focus of my research, of my dissertation, is actually on something that Sunni scholars don't agree with at all. As far as I know, I don't know of a single Sunni scholar that agrees with this, is to receive payment. And am I right about this? That there are no Sunni scholars who agree with it? To receive payment for organ donation. And that the majority of Shia scholars actually now do permit. And that has given rise to a program, the only one in the world actually, that has regulated and routinized the process of matching paid organ donors and organ recipients, and facilitating the monetary exchange that happens between them. Now, general landscape of organ donation in Iran. The general attitude of Iranian public is actually very positive towards organ donation. The number of organ donors is on a steady rise. In a study of 706 adults in Tehran, 84.6% were willing to donate after death. 64.3% of those who believed their marja was against organ donation, despite the fact that they actually did allow it, but they believed that the marja was against organ donation, stated they were still willing to donate. This is donate after death. And this is an example of a donation card in Iran. Hopefully I will have the chance towards the end of our discussion to actually go through some of the campaigns and the cultural activities that have been happening within Iran and kind of led to this kind of, this attitude towards brain death organ donation. So 3,000 to 6,000 cases of brain death occur in Iran. We have a lot of accidents. A lot of people who could be used as who would be brain dead if we had the proper infrastructure to reach those bodies in time and to facilitate the matching of the organs with recipients. But they only make only 20 or 30% of the kidney transplants actually come from people who are brain dead. But the number is gradually rising. Over 65 to 75% of those are actually coming from people who are paid, so strangers who are paid to donate their organs. And that number is decreasing. So it's being replaced with brain death donation. The brain death donation is coordinated through hospitals. It's not centralized, and that is one of the impediments that stands in the way of expanding this program and making it more efficient. And so it tends to be very difficult to coordinate. And it was legalized by the state in 2000 and implemented in 2002. The living organ donation, which is the most common right now in Iran, is coordinated by a nonprofit organization, the Kidney Patient Foundation, that serves as a support group for kidney patients. We really advocated for this program and has essentially been serving as an arm of the of the Ministry of Health by facilitating this program almost entirely on their own.
And this is
since 1997.
They don't get for national.
I will talk about that in more detail, but yes, it's only so KPF, in order for them to facilitate, to coordinate this program, in order for this to become a form of policy, though there are no laws about kidney sales, but for it to be implemented, they needed the support of the Islamic jurists, because the Islamic Republic, everything cannot be against Islam, formally against Islamic law. So if there is a fatwa against it, then they would not be able to implement this program. So the KPF, which consists largely of medical doctors who are on the board, who are their members, but is for the most part run by people who themselves are kidney patients, who themselves are kidney recipients, they sent a group of people, they sent a group of medical doctors who were familiar with the expert technical scientific language, and mujtahids, so people who also spoke who knew the legal tradition, they sent a group to speak to various maraja, and they sent out letters to various maraja to try to persuade them and explain the process of transplantation to not only get fatwas that are relevant to nephrectomy and the transplantation, but to also bring up the issue of organ selling. But what I will describe pretty soon is that the issue of organ selling has always been in Iran a very marginal and a secondary issue, that even though the vast majority of organs, kidneys, come from organ sellers, it's not an issue that is publicly debated. It's not something that is publicly discussed. And even when it comes to the fiqh legal discussions, you will see that there are pages upon pages of discussing transplantation, nephrectomy, and the transplantation itself, but at the very end there might be something that says something about the receiving of payment. So we'll have enough time to explain what that is. So let's look at two examples of fatwas on organ donation. One by Ayatollah Makhramshi, a manager who is nearly 90 years old right now, a very outspoken public figure, oftentimes on TV, almost on a daily basis. If you flip through the 17 channels, you see his face. Has a lot to say about medical issues. Says that the severing of an organ from a living person and the transplantation of that to someone whose both kidneys have decayed, is permissible on the condition that the owner of the organ consents and his life is not put into danger. And caution requires that if money is received in exchange, that it be in exchange for the permission to proceed with the taking of the organ and not the organ itself. So basically, we're not saying that you're paying money for the organ, it's for the permission. In a similar way that our hadith that say that when you pay money to buy the Quran, to purchase the Quran, say that it's from Imam Reza. Don't say that it's not for the Quran that you're paying the money. You're paying the money for the binding and for the paper and the labor that's put into producing it. Ayatollah Nuri Hamadani says, if the life of a Muslim depends on the transplantation, this is about brain death, of an organ from a deceased Muslim, and a non-Muslim replacement does not exist, then the severance and transplantation of the organ is permissible, and per caution, the blood money, diyah, should be paid so that it may be spent on the deceased. But selling is not permissible. So selling in the case of brain death. I can't say, I will agree to donating my organs if you agree to pay this much money to my family members. But selling is not permissible, so brain death. But before death, there does not seem to be a prima facie reason for not permitting sales unless the danger of death or unbearable side effects exists, in which case it is not permissible. So in this case, you are the owner of your body. When you're alive, you can choose. We'll get into discussion of ownership, but you have limited ownership of your body, and you can choose to give up a part of it and receive payment. But when you're dead, you're no longer alive to receive that payment, and somebody else cannot make that decision for you, right? And even you cannot make a decision for your body part, for postpartum, so after death. The issue here becomes what is the danger, what is the harm that could be done to the person who donates an organ? So when it comes to transplantation, it's permissible. Kidney selling is permissible. Brain death is permissible. Let's go one by one into these cases. I'm not going to have much time actually going much into brain death. My focus is in kidney selling. When it comes to nephrectomy, the major concern, as I assume would be the same for Sunni scholars as well, is man the owner of his body? What is the nature of the jurisdiction that man has over his body? Is he entrusted with it? Is he amanadar? Or does he have domination, saltanat, or malikiyat, ownership of his body? And each of these things would entail authority with varying degrees of limitation and freedom. But the difference is really, for the most part, have yielded the same result. That man's authority over his body is limited to actions that do not constitute a violation of the dignity of the body, and that do not cause the body harm. And when it comes to the issue of brain death, obviously, it's about determining whether death has occurred or not. In the case of transplantation from a living person,
Can I ask you a
Yes.
question? With the Hamadini, the deceased Muslim, so that is after person has died. And he would have given permission to use his cadaver. So
bring up donation. So if you consent for
if they
organs to
don't
be used.
if there is no consent or a will, what happens to that body?
So there's a question, so legally speaking or practically speaking? Practically speaking, everybody would have to have either they themselves consent, but more than anything, it's what the family members agree on. So a lot of effort goes into trying to persuade the family members that this would be the right course of action, regardless of the fact of whether the person has an organ donor card or not. So if you even possess an organ donor card and have given consent, in practice, if your family members do not agree, it's not going to happen. There are some scholars who have stipulated that if the life of a person depends on this and there is no other way to save the life of a person, it might in fact be obligatory for you to remove the organ of the deceased person to save that person's life. It might be obligatory. But it's oftentimes very difficult to say that this person's going to die right now unless I take an organ from this one person. It's very difficult.
This was why did not make it obligatory to.
It's not obligatory, it's permissible.
Just a quick question. What did they make of the hadith of Nabi'a fi Jiddati al-Muslim?
Could you translate? I'm actually not a...
So the hadith of the Prophet said that there should be no sale of the corpse of a non-believer, which then would fit the impact on Muslim as well. How did that fit into that?
I've never seen that come up. But, I mean, the source that they use, and I'll get into that in a second, is that you're not allowed to, there's a hadith that says that you cannot use semen, blood, other body parts like the bones. You're not permitted to sell those. And what the Shia scholars say is that the reason for that is there was no permissible utility for those, or the utility that existed was one that was not halal, so it was for sick, for magic tricks, for black magic. That's not a permissible utility. But because today there is permissible utility for blood, there's permissible utility for these various organs, these are utilities that are halal, then it's a completely different context. And there shouldn't be anything impeding that. When it came to, can I go over just a little bit, and if the answers are not, if the questions are not answered, then maybe we can address them towards the end.
Sure.
So when it came to the nephrectomy, the issue of the hormat, it took a lot of convincing. It took a lot of effort by medical doctors to persuade the jurists that in this case, the intention is to save the life of another human being. The intention is not to be disrespectful to the human body. As medical doctors, we're not here to, disregard important Islamic values, underlying concerns for the violation of the integrity of the human body. We are Muslims ourselves. We respect this very much. But really, the primary reason for this is to save, either to advance medicine in the case of dissections, right? Or for the sake of organ transplantation, is to save the life of another person. And surely that is an expedient reason. And the jurists eventually agreed. And when it comes to harm, zara, well, there is no shortage of medical articles, especially in the West, that report that donating one organ is practically harmless. I tend to take issue with that claim, but it is something that is widely believed among the medical practitioners in Iran, and is information that is imparted in the same way to the jurists. So the Hara implantation was, can a severed kidney be permanently implanted into the abdomen of another person? Fine, you say that we can remove it. You say that it doesn't harm the person to remove the organ. It's not a case of disregarding the dignity of the human body. But can we now take a human organ from another person and put it in the body of another person? Some concern, initially actually, Ayatollah Khomeini gave fatwas not permitting this. He said, well, this is murdar, this is a dead body part. and it is najis, it's impure, it's ritually impure. If you transplant this into the body part of another person, how will they perform the religious duties of ablution? How will they pray with this? And again, it took effort from the medical doctors to explain that, well, once this body part is placed in the body of the receiving patient, the blood that flows through this body, through this new organ, essentially makes it a part of that person's body. There is no difference between that old flesh and this new flesh. And of course, that is an oversimplification because, as we know, the organ is rejected from the body if you don't use a lifetime of immunosuppressant drugs. So you could obviously come up with an argument counter to that and say, this organ will always be foreign, and you always have to take some external medication to suppress it. But that wasn't the story that was told. That was not the issue that was emphasized. This organ that's put into my body is now a part of my body. I own this body. Physiologically, it's part of my body. Blood runs through it, and it's the same as any other part of my body. So implantation became permissible as well. So you can remove a body part, you can put it into another person's body. At the same time, we are advocating for brain death donation, considered to be one of the most ethical, moral forms of donation, after, of course, altruistic donation, where I sacrifice a body part without expectation of any payment to a family member or to a friend to save their life. So there's a lot of cultural work being done trying to advocate for people to donate their organs, especially after death. And then we bring up the question, well, if people are allowed to give their organs and I'm allowed to receive that organ, it stands in the way of somebody saying, well, now that you did this for me, I'm going to give you some money in return. And the jurist said, well, if the organ can be removed and it can be transplanted, then there shouldn't be a problem with receiving payment for that, because in Islamic law, if something can be gifted, it can be sold big, and vice versa. So they would say that there must be, for something to be gifted, to be transacted, to be exchanged with another individual, with another Muslim individual, it has to have legitimate utility, and you have to be the owner of that thing. I can't give to you something that I don't have some form of ownership over. And I can't give it to you if there isn't legitimate utility for it. Alcohol, I can't sell that to you unless there is medical use for it. There is some sort of legitimate utility. And both of these conditions are met when we allow transplantation, right? So what stands in the way of, if you can give something, then you can sell it as well? So one of the arguments of one of my chapters that deals with this, after 50 pages of elaborating this issue, I come to the conclusion that something that was happening here was that because of the order in which this issue has been discussed, and the order in which it has been presented to the jurist, in a way the subject that is imagined for the jurist, the seller subject and the altruistic donor subject have essentially been collapsed into one and the same person. So when you're imagining the act of transplantation, you're thinking of a person who is altruistically wanting to save somebody's life, and that's what they're doing. They're giving their organ, being operated on, and giving life to another human being. That's wonderful. And then now this person, somebody says, hey, I want to say thank you. I want to make a payment to you. And you tell me that this is now sinful? Why would it be sinful? I talked to one jurist who said that when I told him that in the U.S., and actually everywhere in the world, either there is no law about this or it's not permitted, it's considered criminal, he was shocked. He said, but why? That doesn't make any sense. Isn't that really unjust to allow people to donate an organ, but then tell them that now if you want to receive anything in return, or if I want to give something to this person, then now I'm committing a crime?
No, but that isn't it, that you're asking a person to donate a part of the body in return for money. It could be free.
But that is not the framing. That is not the way that the issue has been approached and the order in which it has been addressed. So when I would then talk to the jurist and give some information about my own, ethnography, my field research, telling stories of people who were selling their organs, who were doing this, I could share many stories here of, say, a woman who had recently been divorced, a young woman who now wants to, doesn't want to go back to living with her family, wants to live independently in the city. She doesn't really have any familiar support. She doesn't want to get married right away, or she can't. She wants to kind of make it out on her own, and she says, I want to sell my kidney in order to pay rent. Or a person, or a young guy, who his business venture recently failed and wants quick cash to maybe pay for a wedding or to buy a car, and he says, I want to sell my kidney to do this. This is not the story that is presented to the jurors. So when I presented this story to them, I'm not saying that they immediately would have come to the conclusion that therefore this is impermissible, but they paused and said, you know, I've heard, like one of them says, I've heard that there is this place in Iran, it's like, you know, this street called, you know what that street is called? Some like back alley somewhere. There's this Shia, this company, where people go when they buy and they sell kidneys. And I said, well, yes, you're describing Valias Street, this particular nonprofit organization, which is the place where the official matching of donors, that is the official Iranian program for organ donation. So that's where all of this is coming. These are the people who talk to you all, you know? So there was this, they didn't really know where this was coming from. And so the more I talked to them, they said, well, I mean, if it is the way you say, and if it is having real on-the-ground consequences for the donors, if it's harming them, psychologically harming them, it's causing families to fall apart, it even makes the image of the Islamic Republic look bad. He didn't say that therefore immediately that this would be, that the fatwas would be rescinded. They said then that new evidence would have to be taken into consideration, and it's possible that the fatwas would be rescinded through a secondary fatwa. Yes.
So, for like the cases you're describing, if there is a possibility for abuse of selling, has there been any evidence of abuse in any research or any?
So what do you mean by abuse?
Like, for example, Dr. Pradella said, like, you know, hey, you know, don't tell anyone, like, you don't do behind the scenes, but you give me a kidney.
Say that again, don't do what?
You know, for like a kid, like, selling his kidney for an iPad, you know. So, but the kid, you know, might not know, like, hey, you know, that heck is a kidney so much, and there's like, you know, you take the poorest people in society and then just pick the organs. Is that happening?
Yeah, so in the next lecture, I'm going to actually go in the next lecture. We'll actually go into the profile of the donor and what is actually happening on the ground. So this one, I'm focusing a little more on just the fatwas, and then I'm going to go and open up what is actually happening.
How come the Jews did not think about the abuse of the system?
The abuse of the system?
Yeah, I mean, like, you know,
Good
selling,
opinion of people.
yeah, selling your kidney for very old. And, you know, you can understand what was presented, but they could think on their side that, like, abuse of every single ruling, this also could be true.
You know, that is a really good question of why, how is it that you didn't think of that? The people that I talked to, the people that I had access to talk to, were not the exact same people that the Makram Shia was all the time able to be fatwa. And chances are, even if I said that to him, he would not give me a direct answer and say the reason is, well, I was really thinking about that. He would probably give the exact same answer to me. Well, if there is actual statistical proof that there is that kind of harm being done, then you need to present that to us and we would take that into consideration. And I would say that in fact, in the case of Iran, it is not that clear that abuse is happening. And because there have been safeguards put into place, I would say that it is not at all as simple as we might think, because your perspective is very much probably colored by what is happening in a lot of places in the world, in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, in India, in Brazil, in Mexico, everywhere in the world, where because it's not regulated, because it's not legalized and urbanized, it is happening in back alleys. People are, and they are the poorest of the poor who are doing this. In Iran, they happen to actually not be the poorest of the
So
poor.
the 70% you quote as the seller, living donations through the sellers, it's only within the Iranian community.
Only. By
It's
law,
not
an
one-
Iranian can only, and I'll get into all of that, an Iranian can only give and receive from another Iranian.
I don't want to ask you a point, but I have a question. Did the scholars that you spoke to saw it as their responsibility to protect people from making bad decisions? I mean, so what I hear here is sort of like, okay, well, they made a choice, and it was a bad choice, but did they ever say, well, that's not my responsibility if people want to sell their organs?
It wasn't necessarily that it's that's their choice. The question was this: is that it's not within my field of expertise, it's not my responsibility, and even within my ability to go on and investigate what the sociological ramifications of this would be, what the psychological ramifications of this would be. What I have to rely on is experts like you to provide that information to me, and if that information is provided, and he said, not like the kinds of stories you have as an anthropologist, ethnographer, but if you have real statistical data that you can present to me, publish that, get the real data, and bring that to me, then that would be taken into consideration. And then what they would say is that, that at a primary level, at a primary ordinance, which is only based on the essence of the matter, this is permissible. But at a secondary level, where we consider various issues that can come up, for example, at a primary level, you're not allowed to consume alcohol, but at a secondary level, if you're under a condition where that is the only fluid that you can consume, and you will die of thirst if you do not, obviously, Islamic law would say that you are permitted under a secondary condition to consume that. But once that condition is removed, you're no longer dying of thirst or of some medical condition where you need to drink alcohol, then you go back to that primary ordinance. So they would say at a primary level, there is no prohibition in I save your life and you say to me, I want to give you money for this. There is no prohibition in the exchange of that. And when I said that, but how about the fact that this is initiated or motivated by the fact that the person wants some money? It's different from I want to do this altruistically and you want to kind of be thankful and give me a gift in return, but I'm doing this because I want to do it for the money. They would say to me that according to, from a legal perspective, there is no difference between the two. You are giving something to someone and someone is giving something to you. The intention, the motivation, all of that is not relevant to the legal stance. But whether this is a good thing to do, whether this is an ethical thing to do, that's a different question. We're not saying you should do this. I'm not saying this is an ethical thing to do. But I'm saying that there is nothing at a primary level prohibiting this, making this a sinful act. That I give you a kidney, and I say, I have a problem, or can you give me money for this? And you say, here's this amount of money for what you have given me. But at a secondary level, if we establish that the creation of a policy that allows this causes all kinds of harm for society, and that families are falling apart because the poor people are selling their organs, anything that is substantial enough, that could be then taken to the jurist, and the jurist could then give a secondary fatwa rescinding that. But in practice, will that necessarily happen in Iran? I would say no. Because you would have to have a public discussion and public debate on this issue to raise that kind of a question, right? Who would be the people who would want to do that? Who would do it? The same medical doctors who went and got these fatwas, who for the time being seeing the selling of organs to be the most practical solution to the organ shortage? They're not going to bring that kind of moral kind of investigation or scrutiny of an issue that's something that they have been practicing for, 2 decades almost. But even though, from what I've found, a large number of medical practitioners, even the KPF itself, that advocated for this policy, is facilitating the policy, they admit that we agree that brain death donation is superior, that we should be. There are even centers in Iran where only brain death donation is permitted. Organ sales are absolutely prohibited. For example, in Shiraz and now almost Isfahan and Mashhad are doing the same thing. These large cities are absolutely prohibiting organ sales. But what happens is that those who go to Tehran and sell their organs. But still, it's significant. More and more centers are switching towards that. And they're saying, for now, this is the most practical system that we have to prevent all kinds of problems of either people dying, people traveling elsewhere, organ trafficking. We need to regulate this. It's going to happen regardless. If we don't legalize it, routinize it, at least have some sort of oversight, it's going to happen anyway. But gradually, as we build the infrastructure for brain death, for an efficient brain death program, we can gradually replace one with the other. So, can I quickly go over, because we only have 6 minutes left, over some of the why there's such a positive perspective on organ donation. And then hopefully we'll still have some time to address the question. So the public attitude for organ donation. Kidney selling is socially stigmatized. It's not a good thing to say that I'm going to go out and sell my kidney. One primary reason for that is it makes you look bad because you have failed as a provider, you have failed as maybe you're a woman. There could be all kinds of social reasons or meanings behind the fact that you are forced to sell a kidney in order to support yourself or your family. So it's not something that you want to reveal to anybody. These people who are selling their kidneys, from what I found, are not very concerned about what the religious scholars have to say about this. In fact, practically everybody that I talk to, even among the general public, even some doctors who are not specialized on transplantation, and even students within the seminary who hadn't studied fatwas on transplantation, they were shocked that there were fatwas that permitted sales. They were shocked that this existed. Many of the buyers, they assume that it's not prohibited. Since it's permitted in the Islamic Republic, it probably can't be un-Islamic, but many just assume that maybe there's a silence. Maybe nobody really has addressed it. Maybe there is no legal debate about this. When it comes to brain death donation, obviously the question is, on the donors, will I really be dead? And will my body be desecrated? Will it be improper for Islamic burial? These are concerns that exist irregardless of the opinion of the jurists. The fatwas were very much important, instrumental for policy formation in the context of Iran, where you have an Islamic Republic, but not necessarily formative of public opinion. And I have to add a little bit of nuance here, that it doesn't mean that people do not really care about what the jurists say. In the context of the Islamic Republic, where everything that is even presented on radio, television, and the newspapers is supposed to not defy Islamic law, there already is this assumption, this kind of trust of whatever the doctor who comes on TV and says to you is supposed to be Islamic, regardless of whether that marja is going to come on TV and agree with it or not. So the marjas are very much important for setting the precedence for what can be permissible, what can be stated, what can be advocated within the community, in the media, in the movies that are shown day in and day out, trying to advocate for a brain death donation. But it's not necessarily the direct knowledge that I went and talked to my marja and my marja said this that motivates people to take action in this regard. So knowing this, and the Islamic Republic, the state has been very good at this for the past 30 years, using all kinds of media, using all kinds of tools to try to create, to socially engineer its population, and to create a culture of that which they consider to be good, and not necessarily relying only on an authoritative figure or a group of authoritative figures, the maraja, the sheikhs, to kind of to decree something for people. So they used all kinds of methods in their campaign. The objective was to spread knowledge. This is about brain death. Spreading knowledge about brain death donation, building trust in brain death diagnoses, emphasizing the life-saving role of organ donation, highlighting the Islamic virtue and heroism in saving a human life. They distributed organ donor cards at various events, book exhibitions. Usually there's going to be a stall where, multiple stalls in fact, where people are distributing organ cards. Many times when I talk to people and I said I'm working on the issue of organ sales, they take out their wallet and say, hey, I have one of these. Do you want to take a picture of it? I have one of these organ cards. Or when I remember at the home of my mother-in-law, I was discussing something about organ transplantation, and the lady who was helping out cleaning the house, she came up and said that, oh, I really want to do that one day. I really, really want to do that one day. And me and my daughter, who at the time was 15 years old, we have prayed so hard. All of my kids and my husband, we've all prayed that God make us one of those people who we can one day donate organs. Can you tell me how I do that? What are we supposed to do? There were advertisements on TV, all kinds of, the icon of, the organ that you're giving is the gift of life. That sentence, gift of life, is practically everywhere. Murals, here and there, posters everywhere, billboards. Or organ donation themed TV shows have probably been the TV dramas, the serials that are showing during Ramadan, where everybody from like the time they're kind of comatose right before iftar, the breaking of the fast, to maybe 8 or 9 o'clock when they're breaking the fast, and a few hours afterwards where they can't really move from the TV because it was so heavy from eating. Those like 5 hours are critical. You can like morph people's brains. Like you can do whatever you want to them in those critical 5 hours. And what the Iranian media has done is that they create, state television creates all kinds of pretty entertaining TV serials that have various moral stories. And every few years they kind of focus on one thing. For the past several years, for a long time now, it's been organ donation. And you pretty much think that somebody up there is saying, I will allow this TV show that you have produced to be shown at this time, primary time on the station, if you squeeze in something about organ donation in there. So somebody always dies, and the family members have to decide whether they should do it, and then they're not sure if this is Islamic, and then they go to a jurist, and the jurist tells them this is a great thing to do. And they're like, oh no, but what happened to his soul and this? But is he really dead? And they, through these dramas, they go through all of the scenarios that an average person would be thinking of. And so I haven't directly studied this issue, but I would say that it's safe to assume that these TV shows have been the most influential tools for changing people's attitudes of creating a culture of organ donation in Iran. And celebrities have been selected as ambassadors. For example, Asal Badi'i, who unfortunately passed away in 2013, a very much liked Iranian actress. When she passed away, her family decided to donate her organs, and her funeral was publicized, and it was everywhere. I mean, every sentence that came out of the father's mouth at that funeral was like the script that kind of moves, rolls underneath the news. You know how there's like this thing. It was constantly being quoted. It was everywhere. Newspapers, everywhere you heard. I was in the U.S. and I couldn't stop clicking on something that would take me to what Asad Badi's father was saying about. For example, now that my daughter has passed, her body parts live in 7 people, and now I have 7 children. So all kinds of things that he was saying, trying to advocate for the heroism that encouraged them to make a decision to donate their daughter's organs. Yes.
Was this campaign occurring just temporarily at the same time of the Iran-Iraq war, when there was the idea to send your children, your male children? No, just after.
So organ donation became permissible by law in 2000, and it took a very long time. And most of the energy, actually, legal debates have been invested on trying to persuade the jurists that brain donation is permissible. And even though there were fatwas allowing general transplantation, it took a long time to get the consensus that was necessary for this to become law. And even once there was that consensus, within the parliaments, there was a lot of disagreement whether this should be permissible or not. And it took until 2000 for it to become allowed. Yes.
The story that you're telling is one of higher powers putting tremendous priority on this practice. And it's, even if it doesn't have an economic clause, it has a clause in what else they might be doing that could also serve other social priorities. So the question is where that's coming from. This is not a dominant part of what any medical system does. It's tremendously profoundly meaningful for those people who are helped, but that's fundamentally a small number. So how do you understand this degree of social priority?
I think that is a really important empirical question to ask. And I think if I focus on, hopefully in another project on brain donation, that would be something I would look into. I don't have the exact answer to that right now. But I would say that we have a lot of brain death in Iran because we have so many cases of trauma resulting from car accidents. And you have a lot of patients on dialysis. So, like most countries, developing countries, end-stage renal disease is a major issue, and people have talked about it as a tsunami that is overtaking a country. We have far too many people on dialysis. It's very expensive to maintain people on dialysis. Your medical treatment as a dialysis patient is covered by the state, so it's also very expensive. So there is an economic factor. It also is a lot cheaper to offer transplantation, which would also be covered by the state, by the way, than for dialysis. But there's all kinds of other factors. And, you know, Iran tends to sometimes be a little bit unpredictable in that way, that sometimes it's not necessarily something that is the most important, becomes the thing that is discussed every other day, you know, in the news. Sometimes it has to do with who are some of the influential figures within these institutions who have a large say in something, who can make something happen. I mean, we have cloned sheep in Iran. Is that really, like, should that be the greatest priority in terms of, like, advancements in medicine? Some would say yes, some would say not at all. There's all kinds of reasons why we focus so much energy in that particular field when we are so lacking in some other things, developing certain vaccines and so on.
So cloning was done under
Yes.
allowed by the Islamic, or was it done by a private institution?
No, it was allowed. For all of these things, you have to have permissible
Cloning
laws.
could be done at, like, in an individual private lab, like how they did in Saudi Arabia.
No,
It wasn't allowed.
in Iran, you cannot do that if you do not have a fatwa. If it's not
I'm not
permissible,
sure
it's
about
illegal.
that. They can't do it in Saudi
I'm
Arabia.
talking about Iran.
I know, but Saudi Arabia also you can't do anything without the government.
No, but in Iran, no, this was publicized. This is a celebrated as a huge achievement.
Okay,
No,
that's
no.
what I was asking.
No,
And then following your remark that about the people of Iran, like, you know, their attitudes towards donation. Does it? What percentage of those people living donations occur within family? Like, you know, you have a family member with end-stage, you know, disease. How many of them? And if, you know, have you pieced that?
Yeah, the number of people, I don't have
I mean,
exact statistics,
if you
but
have that attitude, you should
right.
have more.
So it's not the numbers, as more and more people, as, let's say this, as organ selling became more and more regulated and routinized and commonplace, fewer people were donating to their family members. And it has much less to do with me not wanting to donate to you as it has to do with you being willing as a patient to demand or even ask that of a person, of a family member. So a lot of people would say to me that, you know, my brother is a match, my husband is a match, my father is a match, but even though initially they may have considered their husband, like one case, a young woman who was very ill, who was almost dying during her pregnancy, was asked to abort her child so that she would survive. She had end-stage renal disease. She opted to keep the child, very, very ill. She was struggling for the longest time trying to make sense of the idea of receiving an organ, even from a brain-dead person. She says, I feel like I'm preying on someone. I'm waiting for someone to die so that I can take their organ. I can't wrap my mind around this. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. I think I have to give in to dialysis. A year later, when I talked to her, she said that a friend of hers told me that, well, she's thinking of getting an organ from her husband, who is a match. The next time I talked to our mutual friend, she said that no, she's actually planning on buying an organ. And so what happened? And I've tried so hard to talk to that person. I'm possibly too ill to talk to her.
But that is very typical of Muslim community.
I don't know if it's necessarily
Where they don't
Muslim
want to,
community.
they use that excuse of, I don't want to demand out of my family members or my husband, or, you know, but they use that excuse.
I would say that we have to be very careful to say that that is an excuse. In this context, I could not judge her change of decision as an excuse,
yes,
because she would, from what she told me, say, I have a daughter, I am very, very ill, I am so afraid that something like this would happen to my husband, and I don't want my husband to suffer. And there was a lot of other factors involved. You know, someone would say that, well, the way that they convince themselves that, well, maybe the person who was willing to donate to me, they're having all the tests done, they're young, you know. I would try to support them financially. I would try to bring them out of a rut. I would do something for them to make it worth it. And I am sure that still to this point, she's having a very hard time. I don't know if she's actually gone through transplantation or not, but chances are she's having a very hard time accepting this and making sense of it.
As a nephrologist, like, you will see that, like, the attitudes of Muslims are very different.
As an anthropologist, I would say that I'm very cautious of drawing that kind of generalization about an entire community of 1 billion people. But, okay. So some concluding remarks. Let me finish these and see how much because we have another pretty long presentation after this, which I think you all would want to hear, and I think might also allow your questions. So fatwas have been formative in shaping policy and enabling policy in the Iranian context, but not necessarily, as we've seen in other contexts as well, sufficient for motivating action. So more than the letter of the fatwa, we have to look at how medical fatwas are rendered legible and actionable to doctors and to the public through policy, media, textbooks, etc. And to be cognizant of the fact that fatwas change as common sense understandings of various social problems change. That secondary fatwas can be given that rescind the first fatwas, and that the making of these fatwas is a dialogical process. It's very dynamic, and there's always this possibility that they will be rebutted. To formulate interventions to alter the attitudes of Muslim populations in all the nation, we must assess to what extent we are responding to concerns that may actually very much exceed the content of the fatwas or those legal concerns that is about, which is something that our wonderful presenters today and yesterday have discussed at length. Having said that, let me tell you at least what the next one is about. If you think that I will not be responding to your question in this next presentation, then we can take a brief moment to respond to them. Here I'm going to be talking about what this Iranian program is, who these people are who are donating, and I'm going to give you some pieces of a very long interview I did with one person who, 2 years after he had sold his kidney, that gives you a pretty strong sense of some of the moral concerns that people have, which kind of corroborated with some other people, what other people had told me, and the concerns they have post-transplantation, which I think can be kind of get us to think differently about this whole commodification of the body, the gifting of the body dichotomy. Yes?
I have a quick question. Does anybody regulate compensation?
That is this. I'm going to talk about the program. Yes.
Just a point about the ethical legal deliberations of the Maradi. So, my understanding of kind of the process of kind of ethical legal deliberation is that there is a need to navigate the source text and then eventually come to a conclusion before. And one of the kind of points that was made is regarding kind of protecting the vulnerable. Is actually motivation to kind of come into it. How do you tell the motivation of the person? So why use that in influencing kind of the practice? So I was just wondering where the principle of intention fits into that. So we know kind of actions are by their intention. So I'll give you an example of the use of morphine. I can give morphine to reduce pain, but also I can give morphine to kill the patient. So my motivation does matter in that situation. So I just wanted to know how they dismiss that.
From what I saw, the concern was mostly that, it's best for the person to have the intention of saving the life of that person, and that is an issue of ethics, of whether this person wants to do the right thing. But when it comes to the actual legal injunction, that is not dependent so much on what goes on in that person's mind. Whether that person wanted to, if the doctor, it is ethical, it is best for them to be practicing, to be operating on someone because they actually want to help people. It's also possible that they're purely doing this. Maybe they don't even mind what the person's dead because they want to take home a few $1,000s. The legal degree will not differ based on that person's intention, even though they would say that ethically it is best for you to be altruistically motivated to want to save someone's life. In this case, it would be the same thing. Now, if I then say, which I would agree as an anthropologist, or a psychologist, or anybody with some common sense and understanding of what's going on, the intention actually then has social ramifications, sociological ramifications for how this program is played out, that you cannot really say that it's just what goes on in the person's mind, that it actually has real effects, then they would say, sure, give us the evidence of that. What is the evidence? Nobody's done research on it. I haven't published this stuff. I cannot take well, let's just say there isn't enough data yet, or data that has been taken to them to dissuade them. And if that data was given, I personally can see no reason why, if it was sufficiently significant that there was negative ramifications for this, that they would on a secondary basis rescind their first fatwa.
So in Sunni Islam, that principle does, so first segment of what you were saying, the principle of intention does impact the final legal outcome, but from what I understand within the Shia tradition, it's not so much
I would say that from what I've said, you can determine that this is an important question to look into. And for someone who's an Islamic studies scholar, and probably if I want to do higher quality work, I should look into that. But from what I have found from talking to them, that was not a concern, and this is the way they presented to me. But I would say that it's definitely worth investigating to see, what are the discussions within Islamic, Shia Islamic jurisprudence on the issue of intention, and how does it work into the issue of law. It's just not, so far, not yet my turf.
But I think about it, so there's confusing two issues, intentionality and consequentialism. Right? So the legal rulings, even in Sunni Islam, are on the lahil, right? Fiqh is based on the lahil. What's occurring? It's about the lahil, not the internal. Right? So that can come from the lahil. They're regulating your external action, not the internal action. And so, and you will not rescind it also because of the so the idea of contingency resides in consequences. Those consequences are not in the control necessarily. There is a space between legal and ethical. Right? You can legally marry and divorce, marry and divorce, legally permissible but not ethical behavior. So I think that you don't want to conflate the space of birth, even in Sunni Islam, about consequences of an action that's legal, but it's not fully developed and ethical. And it's not that we will tell you because someone's intention is ill, if their actions are bad. We do not judge on the intention when you have the account for the law. So I think it's similar in that light. But in any case, you probably want a couple of minutes, or no?
No, I'm just going to go right, because if I go out, I may never come back again. I am slightly distracted.
So
that maybe you hear out there, it's mine, then he's probably calling. Moral landscape of kidney fouling in Iran. This is a photo that I took of someone who spray painted on the wall right around the Kidney Patient Foundation in Tehran. O positive, NE positive, and their temporary mobile number. These are always temporary, so that's after the whole operation. Some people have like big stem cells, or some. You'll see photos. I'll show you photos. Anyway. So, Iranian model for paid kidney donation. In 1987, the first unrelated kidney transplantation in Iran occurred between a husband and wife. Do you think I have to
No,
take
I
a 1
think you
minute
have
break?
projecting it for you. You're projecting it in the...
Sorry, slideshow.
Press F5.
I have those slides.
I unfortunately not, because it's based on very preliminary kind of, not research, but working out their analysis that I'm actually writing right now. So it's not developed enough for me to get comfortable distributing it everywhere. So take notes. So once the first unrelated kidney transplantation took place in Iran, and we had the infrastructure and the technologies, immunosuppressant drugs to deal with transplanting organs from strangers, then the possibility existed for if someone could not find an organ from a family member, say nobody was a match among the family members, that they could then look outside of that social circle among their kin to think, well, how about my neighbor? How about that person down the street? People started asking others to see if others would be willing to donate their organ to them. And naturally, the concern for money comes along. Well, am I going to do this for free? I also have a problem. Can you solve my problem? Like, I will do this for you if you help me pay for my daughter's marriage or for her wedding ceremony. And at first, there weren't really laws in most places in the world controlling or regulating this. And so, as sort of I don't like to use the word market at all, but some have referred to it as such. A kind of exchange system was created where people were seeking out others to receive organs. The Kidney Patient Foundation, that was already providing all kinds of support for patients, for kidney patients, said, okay, we need to regulate this. Because what's happening is that people are demanding exorbitant amounts, and a lot of the majority of people who are in need of organs in Iran themselves happen to be very poor. A lot of these people are people who, if they were not poor to begin with, once they ended with end-stage renal disease or on dialysis, they became poor because they were not able to work. So they found that it's just unfair for people to be demanding all kinds of money for this. You don't want just anybody to be able to step in and sell their organ or demand an organ, so they regulated this thing. And by 1997, a program was created for paid donation. So according to this, donor and patient are matched through the Kidney Patient Foundation. You can't just go and find your own person and bring them there and say, hey, this dude's going to be my donor. No. It has to be through an official list at the Kidney Patient Foundation. There's a list of people who are ill who need organs. There's a list of people who have passed the test, who are willing donors, and meet all the requirements. It is the Kidney Patient Foundation that matches these two people. And there are all kinds of regulations and rules that kind of can take you off of that list. For example, if you agree to be on the list and donate, and then at one point when you are matched with that person, you change your mind because you say, hey, this person's not giving me enough money. You can no longer go back to that list. Now, there are cases where it does happen where people do go back on their list and they do end up selling despite all of these kinds of irregularities, but formally it's not supposed to happen, and they really are putting a lot of energy to make sure that people do abide by these policies. So donor and patient are matched through the Kidney Patient Foundation. The donor and patient must be of the same nationality. This is to prevent organ trafficking. An American can go to Iran. An American can have a transplantation done in some of the top-notch centers, and there are actually people who do this. But if you are an American citizen, if you have American nationality and not an Iranian nationality, you could have no citizenship. But if you do not have Iranian nationality, you have to bring your own American donor. You can't be an American and bring your Bangladeshi, Mexican, someone from Africa and have them offer donor. You have to have same nationality, you have to show your passport. And if you're from Saudi, you have to bring your own person from Saudi. An Iranian cannot receive an organ from an Afghan refugee. Afghan refugees have to also receive organs from other Afghans. An Iranian can't be a giver of an organ to an Afghan, and that can cause problems as well. So, nationalities must be the same. Donor has to be between the ages of 20 and 40. There is some slight variability from one center to another. There's about 137 centers, Kidney Patient Foundation offices across the country, and there is some variability among them. You have to have consent of spouse or parent. So regardless of whether you're male or female, you have to have, if you're not married, you have to have your father's permission. If your father is deceased and you're not married, then you're free to go, you can do whatever you want. But if you're married, regardless of you are female or male, you have to have your spouse's consent. So I saw a lot of cases of men coming in